Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Danielle Balestra, Director of Marketing Technology and Operations at Goodwin, a global law firm with more than 2,000 lawyers focused on building authentic, long-term relationships with innovative investors and entrepreneurs across multiple industries. Thanks for joining us today, Danielle.
Thanks, Glenn. Good to be back.
Absolutely. I was going to say, so first of all, welcome back to this episode of the Art of Marketing Operations. So we first met more than a year ago, back in February of 2022, when you were featured on one of our episodes, when we spoke about how data presents the greatest challenge when seeking to optimize your Martech stack. And as we've chatted more, it is very clear that you are very knowledgeable about good vendor selection for marketing teams, marketing operations teams as well. So let's get started on that for today's topic. So at a high level, what is the best way for marketing operations teams to recognize a need for something new, like say a new Martech platform or a software solution or a marketing tool or something? So how should marketing operations teams even get that process started?
Well, one, I love building out a stack. It's one of my favorite things to do. I mean, like if you saw the recent landscape that's been presented, it's 11,000 softwares to choose from. I mean, how crazy is that? There's so much opportunity. But you have to take that step back before you just jump right into saying, I need a solution. Because you might have something within your current stack that will solve the problem that you're having. So you have to really understand the question of why are we looking at a technology? Is it that there really is no way that the current systems can automate that task? Are we seeing that people are doing some very manual things repeatedly, taking a lot of man hours and taking them away from impactful work? So really, what are we trying to do? Is there a connection gap between some systems that will help us with better insights and decision-making on how to operationalize the business further? So really, what are we trying to address? And then from there, that's when you start your approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, but in your opinion, though, so how can someone sort of assess sort of where their firm, their company is at now, where they're headed, picking the right vendors, et cetera? I guess my question is, what is your best way to evaluate a company's current trajectory? And then when you're going through that process, it's not only the how on how to discern that trajectory and then what would be the right tool, but why is that assessment so valuable in that beginning step?
Yeah. So you see a lot of smaller tech companies immediately pulling in a lot of technology to try and replace a lot of human hours to do tasks. So I'll give an example of event planning. There's a lot of great event tools that help automate a lot of manual tasks, which could be seat charts or keeping room blocks up to date. So you want those tools so that you're taking time away from the team's spending to keep checking with the hotel and updating spreadsheets and updating them again. So those reiterative task-taking pieces that are just taking away from being strategic and impactful for your teams, those are where you're going to look for those tools. So, when you're looking at your organization, you're being told from your leadership, this is where we're trajectorying to go, right? Your CEO is giving that mission. In 5 years, we want to be the top of this area. We want to be growing. You might not know how you're growing. You might not know if there's going to be acquisitions in play or if there's going to be capital infusions, but you're getting the sense that we're not going to stand still. So there are some tools that might make sense for where you are today, right? And then there might be tools that have the flexibility for you to scale as the business grows, or the areas and markets you serve are expanding. The way you serve one industry might be completely different than the way you might serve another customer base for that same industry. So you need a tool that then can sort of flex. And that is very challenging. You're going to need to sit down and think through, okay, if this solves what we have today, could it be leveraged further for where we're going tomorrow? There are some amazing base marketing automation platforms that have that scalability that you could use when you're a mid-sized organization. And as you grow into enterprise, the tool will grow with you. There are, again, great tools for if you plan on being smaller. You will see these differences because, again, if you're a product-driven organization, that scaling can happen quickly. If you're a service-based organization, there is a limit to how many hours a service-based organization can deliver their goods because it's based on the humans' hours to deliver their product. So you won't see as much scale and as quick of a scale for that. So you might not want something as flexible. Maybe you can go with something that works for where you are. Because to get to, going from a 1 billion to 2 billion, you might need to hire a lot of people. You might need to expand geographic regions. So it will take you more time to get to that next level versus, again, a software product that, you just expand and sell more subscriptions. You can do that rather quickly. So I think it's also like, where are you? What industry are you in? That can help you decide, like, how flexible do you need that technology to be? But again, it's going back to that vision. Your CEO is going to give you the vision of where we're going to go. The whole company, and you'll get that from your directors. This is where we're trying to go.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I have found is it's also interesting. You've got the tool that let's say you're switching to a tool or you're moving out of something, you've outgrown a platform, and moving to a new platform. There's also the people side of it as well that I have found that it's one thing just to switch out a platform. We were involved recently with a switch out of a key Martech platform, but the people side of it, now they have to unlearn what they used to do, reset up everything that they now have in the new platform, even though, it's maybe some short-term pain because you're going to have maybe more longer-term benefit. But what's been some of your ways of how do you deal with that people aspect of switching and moving between platforms? And we'll talk about vendors here in a second, but what's your experience and advice on how do you work through the people side of transitions like that?
It depends on how advanced you need that user to be. So I do end up bringing in new talent who really understand to be the power administrator, because the differences between two different CRM systems or two different marketing automation platforms are very drastic. The concepts and the execution are common. So a director can sort of talk through what the strategy is to execute on it. But to actually tactically go in there, the naming conventions, the nomenclature, how things work, how, is it a sequel? Is it a drag and drop? Like, a lot of that nuances can get very confusing for a power user. So, there are a lot of power users that try and learn multiple platforms, but you sort of dilute that expertise when you do that. So it is best to bring, for your power user, a new power user in, but for the supporting staff, that's where, and it's usually more junior, I like to bring what I call learner mentality in, who are willing to roll up their sleeves and check it out, who haven't been on the platform for 5, 6, 10 years. Those people, those are the ones that you can have them start learning that platform and really become a little bit more powerful. And they will be on a trajectory to either become a power user for that new platform, or to become strategic in this director role where you sort of get the concepts, and you can direct, again, new junior people on how to leverage those tools.
Yeah, I know that in one of the situations that I've dealt with recently was that, one of a team members said that their specialty was the name of the vendor. That was their specialty. That they sort of included that from a title perspective. This is my my expertise.
Yeah.
But instead, and then we made some changes, but we wanted to make sure that it's not that you're that vendor's specialty. Your expertise is this more general aspect of marketing operations. That's your function. The tool can, ebb and flow. Maybe it's this tool for 2 or 3 years. Maybe it's going to switch to that tool. But that's a very good insight that you supply, which is, there may get to a point, or certain platforms may have a level of complexity that, you really can't necessarily just so easily transition off. And then you might have to bring that talent in, that to have that sense of specialization or expertise.
I mean, I can speak very specifically to two different CRM systems. Like just the way they're built in the back end is so different. You can't go and implement what works in one in the other because that's not how they're structured or they function. So like there is like you do need somebody who really understands that tool. You can't expect because they've always worked on CRM systems that they all are the same. I mean, that's where the IP and the all of this intellectual property that these software companies have is because they're built a certain way. So when you're getting to those extremely complex things in the world, you do want a power user that has a good amount of knowledge. I've also seen the other challenge where you're bringing in a new tool and nobody's ever used the tool at all. That's another great challenge. So you can't expect a person who's never used that tool to understand the concepts of administrating it and the concepts of getting requirements to build out if it's a journey or if it's a scoring program. You're going to need somebody to help guide them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so let's shift then now to a broader vendor question, which is really vendor selection. So I'd like to dig in a little bit about some tips that you might have to help marketing operations teams be super efficient with vendor selection. So it's one thing to identify maybe 4 or 5 different vendors that might be able to solve a particular issue. But I'd really like to kind of dig in on that process of vendor selection. Now, I know when we've chatted in the past, one of the things that obviously is super key is, talking with peers, anybody who has used that vendor, particularly in a B2B space, testimonials and so forth. That's always a really good place to start. And obviously pretty highly effective, but there's lots of other techniques in selecting vendors as well. So can you share some of your insights and experience on how best to do that?
I'm actually going to quote 2 other people because I've actually seen 2 charts in the last week. One was from Liz Miller at Constellation Research. She presented how CXOs look at some of the different approaches or channels that they use to identify how they select their technology, and that could look at how it fully integrates to the current stack. Does it have the CIO's seal of approval? How flexible is that platform? The pricing. Does the experienced team also agree with it? So the users, are they saying yes? As well as, does it have strong security controls? If you're in a large enterprise, that's very important. Peer recommendations, which is what we talked about, customer support, as well as actual favorable analyst reports. So are you looking at Constellation Research for what they think? Are you looking at Forrester? Are you looking at Gartner for what they think? So, and it's interesting, during Scott Brinker's announcement of the tech stack, Franz showed some information about how marketing operations individuals are looking at it. It's a very similar mapping. I don't have that one right at my fingertips right now, but again, there is a lot of resources and pieces you have to go through with vendor selection. I personally like to make sure, one, I get an understanding of the user requirements, so that, understanding that team need first is so critical, and then understanding the organization or firm's stance on technology. Do they need that security? Is that very important? Is there agreements to key vendors' platforms out there? Like, are you a big user of Microsoft? Are you guys big users of Salesforce? Those are really important things too. How does it integrate? But I do find that tech marketing materials and sometimes even support materials are not very clear. So that's why I do like to talk to my peers who are using the tool currently, to get an understanding of what they felt, how they felt the solutions. Did it deliver what it promised? Was it challenging? It's amazing to get the feedback from those folks because they are happy to share, yeah, this was amazing, or no, we could never get the integration to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think for me, my experience has also been a great, in addition to things that are on websites and getting testimonials or seeing things in social media or LinkedIn, what have you. Those are always great sources. One thing that I would always encourage a marketing operations team to do is ask the vendor that or vendors that you are exploring or looking at potentially hiring and purchasing from. ask them for reference customers. Because if they can give you a reference customer, that's a great way, objectively, just you calling or talking to that individual, and it's just you and that person on the phone or on a video call, for that person to just be very, very frank and share, hey, look, we bought this package because of this. It doesn't do this, or we haven't had a smooth integration, or we haven't had this. So that's always another really good thing too, because obviously a vendor will most likely try to give you a favorable, a customer who's going to give you a favorable recommendation. But most people in that space, when they're talking to someone who's about to make that decision, they really will try. I have personally participated in that as a referring customer.
I have too.
Where you kind of feel like there's a responsibility to share such a balanced view. Here's really what's gone really, really well. Here's a couple of areas that really surprised me that hasn't gone quite so well.
Yeah.
And I think that I feel like that's like paying it forward, that, I want to make sure that I'm providing this person, as they're approaching this decision, I want to provide them with as much information as possible so that they can make an educated decision of this vendor versus that vendor.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I was on calls for other organizations that were in the media industry back when I was at CFO, and the vendor that requested me to start doing these calls would always bring me in to talk to other media companies. Because again, I was an expertise in that area, and again, using the platform. And I knew the questions to ask them to say, did they solve or did they answer this question to you? Or this is something we're a little challenged with, but you just need to know about it before you make your final decision. So I completely agree. I did feel that need to be honest with them and direct. I want everyone to get their problem solved. It wasn't for me to just help that vendor make the money. It was more about making sure everyone gets the right solution. I was so proud of using that platform and I was really happy with it, but I wanted to make sure whoever was coming in wasn't feeling that same sort of pressure to just purchase it because that's what it was. It was like, no, this is an excellent tool and it covers 90%. And there might be a 10% that you just need to know about.
Well, and also putting yourself in that buyer's shoes. If I was in that position and I was talking to a reference customer, I would be pushing them, and I would want to get a balanced review for me to make that, sort of final call. Now, so many of the things that you mentioned there, Danielle, in terms of, the compliance or, the other things, referrals and the other sort of methods that you use in terms of, assessing and evaluating a vendor. One of the ones that, of course, always comes up, and you see it on, certainly every, SaaS platforms, certainly so many Martech platforms, is we integrate to Salesforce. No, we integrate to HubSpot. Oh, we integrate to Marketo. No, we're tied into Oracle. So integrations are always an important component. And I know myself, I look at that oftentimes, if, does this platform that it ties into to Salesforce? Oh, that's great. Oh, that's really, really good. So it naturally has that ecosystem tie and power, but at the same time, sometimes those integrations, one integration is not the same as another integration. One might just literally we integrate, but it only does one thing. It just integrates. Yeah, you can pass your data over, and I can pass a name, or I have
exactly. Fun, hey, you have an API, so that's an integration.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's not an integration.
Exactly, and not every API is the same. Some are super robust, and others literally are just a little couple things. But they do that oftentimes because they want to say, I have integration, into some major platform. So my question to you from a vendor selection perspective is, what really is sort of the value in those solid integrations? How much weight should a marketing operations, executive put on that? And other than things like drilling into what that integration is, how else should, that integration come into play, and how should we really evaluate that as marketers?
So I think I'm going to take it back to the first part, and why we are so focused on our systems talking to each other is for the ability to do our attribution reporting and to do deep reporting. If you have dispersed technology systems that have different data maps and they don't correlate back, you cannot share what is really working, what's not, how much are we doing in one area, and is it impactful for who we're trying to reach. So when you do need these different systems, because you do need things that are really focused on events, and you really need a thing that's focused on digital advertising. You do need all of them, but you need them to start talking back. So if you are in your journey of attribution analytics, which is also a huge debate on all that, you do need those systems to talk to each other. So what the challenge can become is there a true integration, or is it that you have to go through one of those workflow systems like a Workato or a Zapier or a Tray.io, or is it really for your organization to build out the API? And you need to know, do you have those resources? Some organizations don't. So if somebody is saying they have an integration point because they have the ability for you to build an API, they don't have an integration point because you don't have the people to do it. So that, I think, has actually been my personal challenge right now. I'm building along a system I haven't done before. So finding those integrations are challenging because they'll say they have the ability to integrate when they don't. We've also uncovered that some of the vendors we're currently using do have the ability to integrate with us. And we just never explored those integrations, and we're looking at them now. So it is, I think, a challenge, and you have to sit back and understand what you're working with. If you do have those resources to build out an API, to connect to those systems and what you want. Some vendors offer the API, but it's custom built, which means that there will be an additional cost. So as you're going down the channel where they say they can build that thing for you and they're going to customize it very much for you, how much is it going to cost at the end of the day? So don't think it's like a native part of your integration subscription. It might be a bigger cost.
That's a very astute point, which is understanding what does the vendor have to do to make the integration a reality? And correspondingly, what do you and your team or your organization have to do to make that integration a reality? Because I know, like, for example, just let's take one simple thing, SSO, single sign-on. Everybody will, how many Martech platforms have you heard? We work SSO, we plug it right in. And, whether they're using SAML or whatever the terminology or the integration pieces, connection points are, but you still have to get your IT staff to do that. You're still going to have to do a security review. You're still going to have to get that onboarded in the workflow, in the calendar of development. Plus, then your team, once that work is done, then your team still probably has to do work on the integration. Does this even work from a marketing perspective? So I think it's just a very astute comment, which is just because there's an integration, hey, we integrate to Salesforce, or hey, we integrate to Marketo, whatever, know that there is more to do there and on both parts. So I think that's really, really key. Now, and I think what's interesting is, as you think about that onboarding, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have personally developed a quadrant chart that helps with sort of vendor onboarding that you've developed over the years through the, bumps along the road and, potholes and, challenges and mistakes and big wins and, some challenges, et cetera. Can you walk us through some of those main points of what your quadrant model shows?
So I did build a quadrant recently, and it was shared at the recent Best of Breed marketing tech webinars. And I have come through a couple different industries. I'm an expert in marketing operations and tech, but I've worked in media, and I've worked in financial services, healthcare, I've worked in banking, and now I'm currently in law. And each industry is very, very, very different. So I put together sort of an understanding of I did feel like it's not just about the regulation. So, working in healthcare and banking, very heavily regulated organizations. Like, we had to worry when I was at MSK about HIPAA, we had to worry about GDPR, we had to worry about CCPA. And because we are in those type of environments, the clients and the customers and the patients are expecting us to secure their data and not have any type of information leaking out of that organization. So every technology that was brought on had quite a level of rigor. And on the quadrant, I built from going from the left side being not very regulated to the right side being heavily regulated. That's one part of it. Now, I also felt that there was a difference also in maturity. So when I worked at a small company, it was really easy for you to just buy a technology, bring it in. There was no rigor around making sure it's secure. If you are in these regulated industries, there's still rigor, but it's not as heavy. So I made it the top down, I guess, y-axis about the number of employees. So the smaller of your organization you are, it can be quicker to move those adoptions or to onboard the technology versus a large enterprise. And to me, I don't see this as specific for heavily regulated organizations to have slow adoptions. If you have a couple 100,000 employees or even over north of 5,000 employees, it does take a lot of time to bring a new technology in. You have very established technologies. It takes a lot of change management to happen. So in the quadrants, I have to the top right is small but heavily regulated industries. They're going to move quickly. So you could probably onboard a technology within 3 to 6 months. But in that lower right quadrant, it's going to be very slow adoption because they're very large and there's a lot of regulation. So it could take up to a year. That was from my experience at my previous bank I worked with, just explaining why we want to invest in the tool, getting the clearance, getting it approved, doing all the background checks on the information security. Information security took, I think, 6 months alone for us to do that. And then we were a publicly traded bank, so you had to present why the investment was going to be impactful. I had to actually present to the executive board about that investment. So it took a long time to bring in the tool. Now going to the other side of the not so heavily regulated, in the top left, you have you have small, not regulated companies. Those are going to move really fast. Those are going to be like, hey, we really need an event tool. You can just go pick that up real quick, probably 1 to 3 months. Most companies say that they can onboard within 3 months. So that's why it's a real quick turnaround. But if you're in a not very heavily regulated industry, but a large company, that could still take up to 9 months because you still have that change management. You have established systems. You might have old systems that you're replacing with this new system. That's a challenge. You have to now sell the vision of why replacing this system, X system with Y system is important. So there's a lot of actual more politicking. You have to go around. You have to talk to the different departments. You're so large that you have to make sure that change everyone's buying into. And they're seeing the benefit of bringing something in that should streamline or make processes better or give better reporting. So again, there's different challenges for different size companies and different regulations. So we can't say that all of us in marketing tech and marketing ops are treated the same. We are in different roles in different places. Don't feel frustrated if you're hearing from like these amazing leaders that all they've ever done is work at amazing little tech firm startups. You are dealing with some very awesome challenges that your experience you should be proud of because you're learning different skills in these different types of organizations.
Well, and what I find fascinating about your model is, again, if you think about the degree of regulation, how regulated the industry is or the company is on the x-axis, and then the size of the organization on the y-axis, and then breaking that down into those 4 quadrants. What's interesting about you is for you to be able to create that, you've had to work in so much variety. So many various industries for you to see those differences to even create that model. So first off, I applaud you for that. I think that's really, really fantastic. Really, really spot on. And I think that will be a really interesting, we'll make sure to include that in the episode and in the show notes and so forth.
So, for where I just came from in banking, We had to submit the story, put it into the PMO process. And a lot of large organizations will have a PMO process that has to tell a story of not only why the investment's important, but also a bottom line impact. That's challenging because now you have to sort of commit to a number that this platform is going to bring you. And some of the things that you might be looking to put in is not going to show an immediate dollar amount. It is a quality or improvement of how people can work. So you're going to be seeing savings, or you're going to see availability from your staff because now they're taking less time to do a task. So those things are really hard, and it's a very stressful experience going through the process where you will have self-doubt, like how can this even get pushed through? Will they ever even approve it for us? So, work with your PMOs, work with the people who have experience with this to give you the best stories. Also talk to your peers who put things through the process to see how you can make it faster. Here's where we think you should be. Maybe you can make the process move quicker for yourself if you've learned how your organization works. If you are fighting the process, it will take longer. And if you look at this framework and you're like, it took me 2 years to take on this software and the industry is taking about a year, don't beat yourself up. Just take it as a learning experience. Try and figure out your process and figure out how to gamify for yourself. How can you move the stuff through quicker? You're not just trying to buy technology to buy technology. And also these processes will prevent you from just having to take technology that maybe a colleague's like, we just got to buy this to my friend's company. Like, just install it. Having some processes like this help. So that's where I feel bad for the folks in the top quadrant where there is no processes. Introduce a few. Just introduce the security levels. I mean, if you're dealing with data and you're working in California, CCPA is real. Like you are going to have clearance on collecting that data and having it on the data map. So, hopefully there is an information security at your organization, and they should at least be taking a little bit more time to make sure the structure of that software is secure and it's going to keep the data secure for you.
Yeah, excellent. And then if we build on all of the variety of career experiences that you've had, which helped you build this 4-quadrant model, what have you then seen in terms of physical marketing and how that can augment digital marketing across all of these career experiences, or even these 4 quadrants as you're onboarding either a vendor, and then those different sort of size of organization, level of regulation, or degree of regulation. Do you feel that those 4 quadrants also impacts the way in which a marketer should look at this integrated blend between physical marketing impressions and digital marketing impressions?
I think it actually goes more to the way the marketing team is organized and if you have accessibility to those groups. So some very large organizations, they might not be sitting in the same grouping. They might have their digital marketing totally separate from their brand marketing. And the brand marketers might be the ones controlling swag and special gifts and things like that. That's where the marketing leadership should be talking about every data point's important. I was, again, just at a conference where we have to think about all the data. And it's not just the things that people fill out in forms or the mailing address. But for us here at Goodwin, we give a lot of gifts out. And we have like a digital store to buy the gifts and to process the gifts. And the vendor will then send the gifts out. That's amazing data I want in my CRM system. I really want that stuff back with me. It's run by a different person in marketing, but it's a process to make sure that vendor could share that information with us, because these are all data points, right? We're all spending money on all these things. And the company, and especially a CMO, is needing to understand how are they spending their budget. Everyone's going to get budget cut, for sure. I've spoken to our head of FP&A here, and he said there's a game. We always push on the marketers to spend less, and we always push the revenues up to see if we can catch it. So everywhere, we're always being told, no, marketers, you can't spend the money. And the CMOs need all the data. So you got to work together to see how can we capture this stuff? How can we share the at home? How can we share the swag? UTM parameters came back and not UTM parameters, QR codes. Do you remember in mid-2000s, QR codes were a thing and people were like, what are we going to do with this? And then COVID came around and now everyone uses QR codes. Everyone uses a QR code. So you can put that back on your out of home. You want to find out, and the best part is you put a UTM parameter around that QR code. Now you're knowing your traffic to your website came from a billboard or came from a sign in a subway station. So there's ways that you can connect. You just got to work together and know and make sure you have consistent formatting for your codes and how, because then you have the back end. All that data comes in, they're all different all over the place. So that consistency. So hopefully the digital leaders and the brand leaders can work together to say, hey, this is our awesome opportunity.
Exactly. I'm definitely on the same page there. So before we wrap up today's episode, Danielle, what is the main takeaway today, in today's episode, that you want to share in regards to vendor selection or implementation or onboarding to help with some of the challenges facing marketing operations executives today?
I would say first, figure out how your organization is run. Before you go run to bring in a tool, know how it is to bring it in. Is there a procurement process? Is your organization very heavy with information security? Are they very obsessed with their contracts? Learn that part first so that you can sort of have it in your mindset and you can talk to vendors about what you project is the length of time it will take for you to be fully onboarding the tool. Next, don't get overwhelmed by the Martech stack. There's, again, a lot of ways for you to understand and pick and select what tools might fit for you. In fact, they've increased the filtering on the landscape platform that they now host the full landscape on. So there's more that you can pull in and you can identify and narrow down on those vendors to see if those are the right ones. Again, bring the right people into the conversations early on, the users, the administrators, the people that will be impacted by that tool, because you don't want that buyer's remorse. You want to make sure everyone's on the same page. Everyone's going to feel good about this at the end of the day. And make sure there really is a challenge and a problem. Recently somebody wanted to get just a video platform for people that we don't think are going to even use it. So have that honest conversation. Do we think the technology adoption is going to happen? Is this really something that people are going to use? Or is this something that we would like them to use, but they're never going to use? So also have those really hard conversations with folks. So don't feel frustrated with the process and don't feel overwhelmed. The marketing tech and ops community is awesome. And if you ever have questions, there's a ton of Slack channels out there, even LinkedIn. Put the question out. Even if there's somebody you're following and you never actually spoke to them before, put a message to them. They're all really friendly and they all want to help you out. So if there's questions out there, put them out to us and we're happy to help.
Makes perfect sense. Well, that wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Danielle.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
So great having you back. Well, until next time, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.